This episode of That's Not the Finish has been powered by Bodyslam.net.
You are listening to That's Not the Finish podcast, a no-holds-barred pro wrestling podcast perfect for getting your wrestling fix. Now get ready to call for the 3 count.
1, 2, 3.
And try not to get DQ'd. Because here are your hosts.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the That's Not the Finish podcast. Today we have the pleasure to welcome the interview queen, Impact Wrestling's own Alicia Atout. So Alicia, thank you so much for coming on.
No, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be on here. We were in talks about a few weeks ago, and now it's finally happening, so I'm excited to be here.
Had to move stuff around a little bit with the schedule, but it all worked out for the best.
Exactly. All that matters is we're here. We're shooting the breeze now. I'm excited.
Awesome. So, Alicia, we've been following you and your interviewing journey in a sense, and we've seen that you've interviewed many different people from musical talents and wrestling talents. So we wanted to know, how did you get your start in interviewing musical and wrestling talent?
Yeah, so I pretty much used to write a ton in school, and my parents found out that I was writing in between classes and stuff, and they said, why don't you just throw the stuff online? So I did. I was writing a review every few days, just listening to music, writing it down, posting it online, and then it got to the point where I started reaching out to musicians via email, doing email interviews. I'd send off 6 to 10 questions, they'd fire them back, and, that's what I did for a while. And it was just a hobby the first couple of years because I was also in school at the same time, grade 11 and 12. And then it got to the point where my graduation was coming up and I had to figure out what do I want to do. So I applied to some colleges, universities. I was accepted to them for journalism. And then I realized I don't really think that's exactly what I want to do. Like, I don't want to be a newspaper type journalist. I love what I'm doing now. So my parents are super supportive. They said, keep doing what you're doing. So I decided to, as my school put it, go into the workforce and start my website on a bigger scale. I started interviewing some bigger musicians and then got to the point where my site was fairly big enough where I took a chance and interviewed a wrestler. And it went over so well with my fans. So I just kept doing it. And 2 years later, I'm here still interviewing.
Excellent. I was just curious, who was the first wrestler you interviewed?
First wrestler ever was Ali, or Cherry Bomb. I reached out to her a couple days before a show. I had no idea how it would go because it's funny enough, interviewing wrestlers is very different from musicians. And she was just an absolute sweetheart. She's like, yeah, meet me here, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, sweet. So I showed up. We knocked the interview out. She was amazing. And it gave me not only the confidence, but just the fact that my fans loved it. Just the excitement to move forward and do more wrestling interviews.
One key thing that I have been just seeing around in a form of advice from multiple different people is, if you don't ask, you'll never in a sense know or really receive any sort of response at all. And a lot of podcasters or a lot of people that are going into content creation, any sort of medium, they always have a issue or are always wondering or always just reluctant to ask people. And in your case here, it just seems like you were able to just reach out and then get a lot and get people to respond to you, and that's what actually I was. So I was also kind of reluctant to reach out to people in the beginning as well. But honestly, I noticed that a lot of people, especially in the wrestling industry, are very, very friendly and are more than willing to do interviews with you.
Well, that's the amazing thing about wrestling. When I used to do music, well, I still do music, but it's so much wrestling now. When it came to doing music heavily, you reach out to a band. Then usually they'll say, hey, hit up my publicist. Then a publicist reaches out to a manager. Then that manager reaches out to a tour manager. And then it trickles all the way back down from everyone I just mentioned back to the band. So it's a headache. And I did that for 4 years. And it's just the way that it operates. That's not a complaint. It's just, it's the way it is. When it comes to wrestlers most of the time, hey, dude, I see you're at that show. I'm working that show too. Can I grab you for 10 minutes? Yeah, absolutely. Done. That's it. And it's not that musicians aren't friendly, it's just they have that code to go through, whereas wrestlers, it's very DIY for most of them. It's very much, hey, we need to put ourselves over, we need the press for some of them, and so they take care of their own business, and it's just so much easier to reach out to people and get that content.
Exactly, especially with the whole DIY culture with pro wrestling. It's something that they always want to just jump on any sort of opportunity that they can get, like big or small in a sense. And it's almost that they're just so much more open to helping other people out as well as, helping them out in return. So like, what would you say it took for you to get to get to where you are today doing interviews with Impact Wrestling?
A lot of hard work, no sleep, a lot of sacrifice. I sacrificed just a lot of fun and friendships, to be quite honest, because when I started this, I was 16, 17, and rather than going out and meeting up with people, of course I still made time for it, but not as much as a regular teenager would. I would be home writing these reviews, or 4 or 5 nights a week I'd be out at concerts when I first started, just hustling. I'd sometimes do 3 venues in one night, interviewing 6 bands in a night. And it was just to get that content, because content is king. And I think people in the industry really picked up on that I hustle, the interviews are good, and it kind of just grew from there in my reputation. So the way that it led to Impact was, of course, as I mentioned before, I did the music stuff, which transitioned to wrestling. And then I started working for a company called BCW, which is co-owned by Impact VP Scott D'Amore. So I did a couple of shows for them, and then they had a co-pro with Impact, and they just continued to use me for that. And they liked what they saw, and then they brought me on TV for their Canadian dates. And it's really a simple story, and I'm glad it's just very natural. I feel like my whole career has just been very organic, and there have been highs and lows, but if you didn't have those lows and learning experiences, then I wouldn't be where I am. So yeah, it was an interesting journey.
Yeah, everything's basically like one big learning experience, and just like the way that things snowball into each other and like leads to bigger things, it's just like really amazing how that just like through like the journey it goes. What you said too about content being king, that's like a very big rule in virtually like anything that you do on the internet, blogging, YouTube, podcasting. It's always about the content and always about good writing skills as well as also good speaking skills. Totally. So we also, and if I butcher this name, I'm really sorry, but you're an alumni of Dunbarton High School, correct?
Yes, I am.
So do you ever see yourself interviewing a fellow alumni, such as the artist known as Snow or Sean Avery, by chance?
That's actually really funny. I was once offered to interview Snow, and the timing just didn't work out. I was gonna go downtown, Toronto, meet up with him, and it just fell through because I don't remember if he had a scheduling issue or I did. So it's actually really funny that you bring that up, and the fact that you know where I went to high school, that's great. But yeah, it's definitely not out of the picture. It's something that I looked into and was gonna happen, and unfortunately just didn't. But I'm sure it could happen if we put those wheels in motion.
If Snow's listening to this right now, or Sean Avery by that chance, hopefully maybe they'll be hitting you up for an interview.
Definitely.
So you've also stated in past interviews that your parents made a huge impact on your musical taste. So do you ever see yourself one day interviewing one of your parents' idols?
Ooh, what's interesting is I've interviewed a lot of people my dad loved growing up. He is the reason that I got into wrestling and the reason I love wrestling so much. So I've interviewed tons of the people that he watched when he was a kid, and I've formed friendships with or have worked with everyone from Scott Hall to Mick Foley to Tito Santana, Jake the Snake. It's really gratifying. Bob Backlund I got to meet recently. It's just super gratifying to not only be able to work with the people that I know my dad loved, but also bring my dad to shows. He does a lot of the camera work, funny enough, for my interviews. So he comes to shows with me. We get to watch the shows, hang out. I have such a close family. So it just worked out in this incredible way. So to answer your question, that was a not a long story short. That was a short story long. But I've been able to interview some of their idols, and that's super exciting.
Excellent. And your father, he also plays in a band, correct? Or does he still play in a band?
Oh my gosh, you guys did your research. That's awesome. He used to. He used to be in an alternative band, like alternative kind of grungy group called Victims of Luxury, VOL. And
that's an awesome name, I'm not going to
lie. They did a lot of touring. They were on a lot of TV. And then he ended up having me. And it was one of those choices where it's like, all right, do I continue with the band or do I raise a family with my wife, my mom? So he chose the latter, and I'm obviously thankful for that. But yeah, it was kind of one of those decisions.
Now here's a question: would you ever consider interviewing him?
So funny thing is he does not like being on camera. So I totally would, but he just won't get in front of the camera. We've had his hand in a footage before. There's a band I interview called Palais Royale, and they're like brothers to me. They always joke around with my dad, and I know their mom, and it's just one of those things where every time I interview them, we've done like 7 rounds together. Every time I interview them, they always put my dad's like finger in the frame or his hand, or you can hear his voice, and this is ongoing jokes. So I'm not opposed to it for sure. It's just if he ever actually gets on camera.
Well, hopefully, maybe one day he'll overcome the camera shyness and consider it.
Yeah, exactly.
So also, we know that Canada is very well known for their Tim Hortons. Would you, you probably have seen one like on every street corner. What's your go-to beverage or breakfast item from there?
So there are 2 things. They excuse me, they have one of the best hot chocolates ever. It's not watered down. It's so good. I think in my like 23 years of life, I've had 2 watered down Timmy Ho's, and that's a pretty good record. So and they also have this drink, and it's called, what is it? Dark chocolate swirl. And it's almost like a frozen hot chocolate, but really thick. And they just load tons of whipped cream on it. It's probably horrible for you, but it is delicious. Get that with some honey dipped Timbits, and you're set.
So I actually went to the University of Oswego, and there was actually a Tim Hortons there, and like you virtually never see them in the U.S. ever. But I actually stopped into a Tim Hortons. This was like my first Tim Hortons when I was going to college, and when I went in there, they actually had like a donut with I think it was like maple glazed or a maple glazed donut with like a big strip of bacon on it, and I was like, okay, that just beats anything that Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kreme ever had.
They have so many good flavors, and I'm not even a maple fan, but like some of their maple stuff is pretty good. You always gotta love Timmy Ho's, and it's funny because now when I go to the States, there are certain spots in certain cities that have them, and they're like these little gold mines. Because even though whenever I'm in different places, I always try to eat their cuisine, but America's not too far off from Canada, so I always still go to Timmy's when I'm doing those road trips.
Awesome, awesome. I really wish that there were more Tim Hortons around here. I definitely would like want to go to them more often instead of just like the coffee that I get in Dunkin' Donuts every morning. So when you're not conducting interviews in the music and wrestling world, what do you like to do in your free time? What are your hobbies or interests?
Yeah, it's so difficult because there's not a ton of that free time. I find most of the time, even when I have that freedom, I feel guilty and I go back to working. But I love watching TV with my family. I binge watch like anyone else. I've been watching a lot of Everybody Loves Raymond, old Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Seinfeld episodes. I love those shows. And a lot of video games, actually. I've been playing. We have 2 of the Nintendo Classics in the house, so I've been playing a lot of that. I've been trying to get my Galaga scores up. So just pretty much relaxing, quite honestly.
Yeah, you definitely have to relax after all the traveling and all that, like stress and everything on you. I can just imagine, especially like having to travel from so many different areas and conducting those shows, those interviews. It's, it can just take, a lot of take your mental energy and also physical energy out of you. So definitely need to set aside the time there to relax.
Oh, definitely. And the thing is, even though I'm not in the ring wrestling or on stage performing most of the time, it's one of those things where sometimes you have these conventions or shows where you fly out at 3 a.m, which means you have to be up at 1 a.m, and then you don't sleep on the plane. Then you arrive, you get in makeup, you do your appearances, and then you fly out either right after. You stay at a hotel, but then people go out, and then I always get vlog content, so I end up staying up late, and it's just this cycle sometimes where for like a week or days on end, you're just busy, and it's just mentally, it gets you so tired, especially if you're in a spot with a time change as well. So when you get those rare moments to just relax and not think about work, even though I am thinking about work, they're amazing.
Having to fly between different time zones, especially within like a short period of time, like what that does to your body is just, it just screws up your internal alarm clock in a sense, and it just makes you like sometimes like you just feel like a zombie essentially.
Oh, that's exactly it. I went to the Netherlands recently, and it messed up my body and brain so incredibly hard. I just couldn't believe how, even though it was 6 hours, I was like, oh yeah, my body will adjust. It doesn't, because I remember being up at 10 a.m. their time, and it was like still almost dawn when it comes to where I live. So it messed me up so hard.
Yeah, I know that. I definitely know that feeling, like flying between time zones and stuff. It takes some time to recover, but eventually, luckily, like when you start to get used to it, it's a much shorter time to recover. So since you are a very big music advocate, I can tell, and also for wrestling, who would you say are your top 3 favorite bands of all time?
Okay. The Beatles, Kiss, and maybe it would be a tie. Third would be a 3-way tie between Maximo Park, Mystery Jets, and that's hard. Maybe Bombay Bicycle Club, where like those are all British
All
bands
British
that I
bands.
Yeah.
Like the best music was from England. It's from England. So I think you probably know what the next part of the question here is going to be. But what are your top 3 favorite wrestlers of all time?
Jericho, Omega, and either Cody Rhodes or Cena, because I just all of those are kind of that's not even like a 1, 2, 3. That's just a top 4. So I'm kind of bending your rules here, but those are probably my 4 favorites. And then if I throw a tag team in there, it'd be the Bucks.
I know it's so hard to like just like you're always like fighting between like, oh wait, should I put this person here at number 2? Should I put this person here at number 3? And then sometimes it's just better like, okay, let me just cram everybody into number 3. Just honorable mentions.
I don't offend anyone. I'm just gonna throw them all out there. I love you all. There you go.
There we are. So there's no favoritism here. It's just that it was just our question here. So blame us, I guess. So here is one really interesting question here that we were thinking up. But being an avid wrestling fan, have you ever thought of becoming a wrestler yourself? And if you did, what would your gimmick be?
So I haven't thought of actually. Well, I have, I guess, but not that I wanted to. I've thought about it and right away thought, no, this is not for me. I just bruise like a peach. I'm such a baby, and I just don't think I'm cut out for it. But I have thought of a gimmick before, and I think I'd just be that person who does so much research on their opponent that the whole match I'm like screaming all this dirt to the fans, and like I'm whispering in the guy's ear, and they just completely crumble from pressure and embarrassment. And I wouldn't even have to pull out too many wrestling moves. I'd just crush their soul and emotion.
That actually sounds like a really good like heel manager type of gimmick. Basically just like
exactly
backing
it.
somebody up and then just like going like all in on their personal background and everything, and then eventually like you just grab that mic and you just start yelling into it, and then eventually they're just so crumbled that they can't even focus on the match. That's actually really awesome. I like that idea.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Impact Wrestling might be scouting you for a different role soon.
Yeah, right?
All right, so that's basically all the questions that I have, but I know that Dom has some for you, so I'm going to be handing the mic, in a sense, over to Dom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, thanks for coming on. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun so far, and I'm excited for your questions.
Oh, I'm glad to be asking. So I'm a huge fan of live music. I also do like concert photography and stuff like that as well.
Sweet.
I've been to like hundreds of shows. What's one bucket list concert that you haven't gotten to see yet, but you need to see like at some point in your life?
I need to see Kiss live. I have to, and I know they have this final tour coming up, and I have some stuff in the works to see them, and it's going to be an amazing experience. I need to see them. They're just one of my all-time favorite bands, as I mentioned before, and to see them live and just scream their lyrics would be amazing. So that is my number one.
Sticking with the theme of that last question, who's one person, either alive or deceased, that you would love to interview in music or in wrestling?
George Harrison. He was just such a sweet soul, and my Cito, or my grandpa, passed away when I was 4 or 5, and he resembles George Harrison so much. It was just strange for me growing up, and now, years later, seeing photographs. So I just think it would be really cool to sit down with him, pick his brain. He is from my favorite band of all time, so that would be pretty surreal.
Yeah, that would be a very cool one to get. So you've been doing a lot of like podcasts and other bookings recently. Do you enjoy being interviewed as much, or would you prefer to be the one asking all the questions?
I think I'm more comfortable in asking the questions simply because I've been doing it for so long, and this really puts me on my toes. It's not that I don't have to think on my feet when I'm talking with people, but it's easier for me. Whereas here, I don't know what's coming. I don't have control. You guys can throw whatever you want at me, and I have to think within a second. Okay, what's my answer here? You can't trip up. You can't say anything wrong. Not that I think I would, but so. Yeah. It's different. I really enjoy both because I've been doing a lot of these podcasts as of late. I'm meeting so many new people who do what I do. So they're both really fun. I have to say I enjoy asking the questions more, but this is so enjoyable.
When you're doing your interviews, how do you go about conducting your research and preparing for all of them?
I like to say I'm a professional stalker. Pretty much, I will find. It's true. Let's say I'm interviewing Jericho. I will go through his social feeds, not only for the last week, but like 2 years ago. And if I find some snippet of gold that people, sure they saw the tweet, but I find they might want to know more about, I will bring that tweet up, or I'll phrase it differently and bring it up, and then the reaction on people's faces, like, oh, you remember that, or you cared to ask that, or that's a hobby of mine, because you find these little nuggets. The reaction is priceless, and then fans come back thinking, whoa, I never knew they liked that, or they did this, or that's part of their career. So I just stalk for a long time, and sometimes you just do it for a couple hours. You go through their socials, you listen to podcasts, you read other interviews, and sometimes it takes days. It really depends on the interviewee, how active they are, if they've done any interviews. So that's usually the way I go about it. I put some headphones on and I just dig really deep.
Yeah, I mean that's the real tough part, is trying to find those small pieces that no one else really covered or is not really touched upon too many places. And you always want to come up with the most interesting content that you come with, compared to, you don't want to have the same interviews that everyone else has had. So trying to find those hard to find stuff is what you always want to do.
That's exactly it. I find people enjoy my interviews because it's not always the same questions. It's those random questions or things about the interviewee's hobbies that fans never knew. And I'm really, I pride myself on that and my research.
Yeah. Do you find it tough finding a balance between running a music blog, a YouTube channel, managing all your social media accounts, and then all of your other bookings? How do you find time for all of it?
Yeah, it's difficult. I pretty much handle, not pretty much, I do. I handle all of my social media. I coordinate my bookings. I am the one doing all of the research. And because my dad was in the band, he kind of plays the manager role where he'll help me do more of the logistics for stuff. But it's really hands-on. I edit all of the videos, so it's hard to balance. I really have to be good with time management and scheduling and not forgetting stuff. I write down everything. So it's difficult, but it's worth it in the end. I like having that control, and until it gets to the point where I need someone to really do stuff for me, I think it's nice that I can still be busy but manage all of my own stuff.
What was it like getting to interview some of the biggest names in wrestling today, like Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, and Chris Jericho, to name a few?
It's amazing. It's a complete shock to me because these are people that I've either watched since I was a little girl or people that I started loving a few years ago when I got into the independent scene in wrestling. So it's strange for me to not only know some of these guys, but be friends with certain ones and have some of these wrestling legends in my phone, and I'll text them for advice and they're just so open with me. It's a bit of a dream come true. You always hope when you're younger you can meet your heroes and they're great, but never did I think I'd befriend a lot of them. So it's a pretty cool experience.
You've conducted interviews at various different promotions: Border City Wrestling, Impact, Rise. Do each company have their own different guidelines on how you can conduct your interviews?
It really depends on what kind of deals you work out with people. Most of the time I come down, I do stuff for them, and then they're totally cool with me having free reign to talk to whoever I want. And for the companies that do that, which is most of them, I'm so thankful. I'm losing my voice, guys. I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful because I get to do stuff for them along with get content for myself. So usually it's the same. They let me kind of have free reign.
Have you ever encountered any specific difficulties where you've had to change your style of interview at the last minute to work something out?
Not really. The one thing that was kind of thrown as a curveball to me, and this is by no means a complaint, it was amazing, was I showed up to the Impact tapings and I thought I would just be doing my normal backstage promos. And then Don walks up to me and he says, "Hey, you have a live segment with Scarlett today." And in my head, I was thinking, I've never live hosted. I've never done something live. It wasn't a confidence thing because I knew I could do it, and I think it turned out amazing. But I was like, whoa, this is different. So it's not that they were changing the guidelines. Live interviews and interviews, it's a part of my job, but I did not expect that the day I walked into that building. So that was one of the best surprises ever because it's one of my favorite things I've done in wrestling.
Yeah, being told to throw on a live interview is quite a change of pace when you're supposed to have everything planned out and ready and beforehand, and you don't know what to expect. But it keeps everything exciting, and it's also a great way to break out as well.
Definitely, it's one of those things I've never tried before as far as live hosting goes, and now companies are literally bringing me to their promotions to host live interviews. So it broke that comfort zone for me, and I'm glad that for my first time doing it, it didn't flop. So I'm really
that's
glad.
always good.
Yeah, definitely.
Out of all the interviews that you've done so far, which would you say were the most memorable?
That's really difficult just because of the sheer amount that I've done. Some that mean a lot to me. It's the rounds I've done with Rey Mysterio, Omega, Cody, the Bucks, Mick Foley. I really loved my interview with Jake the Snake. He was the first WWE legend I ever sat down with, and it was about a month into my wrestling career, so that was really cool. There are so many. I've done over 1,000 video interviews, so those are just a few, just to name a couple.
Just a couple. So my final question: what does the future hold for Alicia Atout?
The future involves a lot of traveling, working with new and different promotions, and even better interviews. I always strive to be even better at my craft and not be complacent. So even to this day, I'm still trying to do even crazier, stockier research. I don't think that's a word, but I just made it one. I want my interviewees to be comfortable with me, which I feel like every single interview I do, they now are. That was a goal of mine when I started in music. And yeah, you guys are going to see my face hopefully on a lot of new banners, a lot of new graphics, a lot of new promotions, and hopefully in a lot of new countries. That's a huge goal of mine. So, and I have some stuff in the works. So all you guys have to do is stay tuned and see where you can find me next.
Well, we look forward to seeing you all everywhere. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much to you two. This was so much fun. I really appreciate the interest. The really good questions. That's a huge thing for me, of course. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank Moses and Dave for helping come up with these questions as well, because they did put in some, even though they couldn't be here today, they did put in a good amount of effort into the research here. But yeah, I mean, I know that you were saying that you have a lot of big stuff planned for the future, but what do you have in the next coming weeks that everybody can find you at, or should look forward to seeing you at?
Yeah, absolutely. So on February 23rd, I'm going to be in Mississauga in Ontario for Destiny Wrestling and Blackcraft Wrestling. They have this crazy co-pro. I'm going to be hosting, ring announcing, opening the show. So if you guys happen to be in the Ontario area, come down to that. It's going to be amazing. And then if you guys aren't Canadian, we'll actually have one Canadian date at the beginning of March. So on March 10th, I'm going to be in Hamilton, Ontario with Alpha One Wrestling. It's an amazing promotion run by Ethan Page from Impact, so come down to that. And on the 10th, it's there. Then on the 9th, I'm going to be at Big Event in New York, which is going to be phenomenal. I was there last year. It's just so many meet and greets, signings, meeting fans. I love it. March 15th, I'm with Warrior Wrestling in Chicago. I debut there, hosting, doing some interviews, meeting fans. So that's those are like my next couple of shows. There's some other stuff sprinkled in between. I have my weekly Twitch show with Anthony Corelli for Impact every Wednesday. So that's happening very soon. So those are just some of the upcoming shows. Mania Weekend's going to be nuts. Watch my socials for that. I'm at Alicia Atout. I'm working a bunch of shows, working directly for WrestleCon, signing for them. So I'm excited. My brain's scrambled because I'm just thinking of all this amazing stuff coming up. I can't wait to be in new cities, new territories, and yeah, it's going to be crazy.
Sounds like a lot of stuff to look forward to, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait.
Yeah, us too. All right, so thank you so much, Alicia, for coming on to That's Not the Finish.
Oh, it was my absolute pleasure. And thank you to you guys for, as I mentioned before, just caring enough to have me on. The fact that podcasts and people like you take an interest in what I do, it means so much, because when I reach out to wrestlers and musicians, I hope to get that same kind of response and care. So thank you guys for being that way.
No problem. We're all one big wrestling community after all.
Definitely.
Definitely. All right. So once again, thank you so much, and we'll catch you next time on another episode of the That's Not the Finish podcast.
Bye, guys.